It was quite an interesting week for the oil and gas industry, particularly here in Nigeria. So much to chew about. I've got Dolapo Oni, who's the head of energy research, to help chew these issues and, of course, give a projection of what likely is going to play out when the markets resume on Monday. Dolapo, good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me as well.
So, as I said, it's been quite a week for the markets, including, oil and gas, with Brent steady around $50 to $52 a barrel. I remember that was quite an exciting news, particularly for you, because you were all about it on social media. Yeah. But has this improved your optimism in the market?
Okay, the key reason why I was really excited about it is because, in my mind, I'm looking at the fact that Nigeria is quite close to getting two major streams back, Forcados and Akwa Ibom. And if we have those two streams back, we're currently doing 1.6, they will take us comfortably to about 2 million barrels per day. Now, at full capacity, which is what we expect by the end of October. 2 million barrels and with $52 per barrel. I think that's quite a good one for us, considering the fact that we've budgeted $38. That was the budget benchmark on base of which revenue was calculated. That should compensate for the barrels we don't have, because we worked with, the budget was based on 2.2 million barrels per day. But then that's just for the last quarter of the year. The question is, will that hold till December? Will that hold till January? There are real concerns around that. I must admit, we're still seeing more barrels coming on the market. So we're still seeing likelihood of, more issues with OPEC. OPEC still having to discuss at another meeting.
I was just going to say that it always seems as if our projections are based on hope. Yeah. We're hoping that OPEC would say this at the next meeting. We're hoping that Iran will not oversupply the market. We're hoping that Russia will not say this. We're hoping that Saudi Arabia will not do that. When are we going to sit down and take matters into our hand and say, look, we're not basing our assumptions on hope, but these are the calculated plans that we have in place to ensure that in the eventuality that this doesn't happen, this plan will be launched. If this does happen, if we have oil prices inching up to as high as $55 to $60 a barrel, then this is what was going to come into place.
Well, we actually have that coming. There's a roadmap which the petroleum sector is meant to unveil, hopefully this month. Hopefully. We've been discussing it on social media already. The Minister of Petroleum has actually come out to do a sort of a series. They're currently doing a series where they're talking about various aspects of the roadmap that will be coming out. Now, so what that is really going to do is to tell us how exactly are we going to move the oil sector from where it is right now, which is 1.6 million barrels per day, to where we want to be, which is 3 million barrels per day, or if possibly more. How are we going to move the reserve, which we have currently, which last DPR mentioned was about 35 billion barrels, billion barrels in total, to where we want to be, which is 40 billion barrels. So all that requires a lot of effort. I think so. There's a plan coming to ensure that we see how that is going to happen. But based on what you said, how do we move essentially away from oil to ensure that we don't always have to depend on when oil prices are up or down? I think that's going to take a lot more than just what we're doing at the moment. It's going to require some serious fiscal investment in various other sectors of the economy.
So just yesterday, midweek, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources actually talked about an expected investment from a Chinese firm, about 4 billion or so, coming into the economy. So are those the kind of
exactly? That's what we need to see, because and I can tell you this because we've had some meetings as well internally with Chinese investors as well. Because after they had the trip to China, a couple of them came back actually and started making some inquiries around. And I noticed that the focus for them really was gas. Now, we are likely to see the Chinese investment come more into the gas space. Chinese are fantastic already developing gas-powered trains, gas-powered trucks, and all that. So they're really looking at the gas sector in Nigeria, which actually needs a significant amount of investment. So we're talking about pipelines, we're talking about gas compression plants, we're talking about gas processing plants. That's really what they're looking at. And I think that would be fantastic because it would impact on power. If we have more gas, then we can actually have more power. And if we have more pipelines also too, we can actually route the gas to more power stations. So I think that's an area that would be a very key investment to watch and see how it goes.
So in your conversations with these investors, has anybody ever said anything about gas flaring? Because that's another major issue that for a very long time until today still hogs the front burner.
Yeah, it is. But you see, the real issue around gas flaring is it's cheaper to flare and also pay a penalty. Because if you try to go through the whole hog of developing the gas processing plants to push the gas to a power station, the unit cost of the 1,000 cubic feet that we sell gas at in the market is still going to be higher than the current prices that are allowed for electricity. Now, you can only achieve profitability on such projects if you're selling to a commercial plant, or you're selling to an industrial user, or who has a captive power plant who is ready to pay $4 to $7 per 1,000 cubic feet. But if you're going to sell to the power plants, you're not going to make a profit as a standalone gas project at $1.80 or at $2.50 or even at $3.30. So that I think are issues that have to be addressed before the gas flaring issue, especially for power, can be addressed. But gas flaring into CNG, gas flaring into LNG, I think that's always going to happen without any issues.
Well, then, Dolakma, I know that's a particular conversation that isn't going to end just yet. In fact, it continues to heat up by the day. But another thing I noticed during this week, it seems as if the major news driving the market right now is OPEC's output deal, either to curb outputs at current levels, plus a very recent drop in U.S. inventory. So, for how long do you think this news will hold the market? You mentioned that OPEC is supposed to have another meeting on the sidelines again.
In Istanbul. This I think it's next week. That's likely again another opportunity for them to sit down and work out the modalities of that cut, because I'm not sure they really concluded on who's going to make which cuts. What they just did was say, okay, you know what, we're going to exclude Nigeria because Nigeria has its production problems. We're going to exclude Libya because Libya had its production problems. We're going to exclude Iran up until they get to 4 million barrels per day, which is their target. But the question is, so who are actually going to make the cuts? So I think that's what they need to work out in Istanbul, because they don't want to get to the November meeting and then start having that argument, and then November meeting ends and there's still no deal. No deal. You understand? So that's not going to be good. So I think they want to have that Istanbul meeting first, so that they have that modality worked out, and by November they work it out. But then how long is that going to hold the market? I mean, America's inventory data was a bit surprising, because it showed a very significant amount of draw on their inventory. They're about 3 billion barrels short of their limit, and that showed that they're not producing the level they need to produce. And also it means that even with all the investment in rigs that we're seeing in America, the production hasn't been fully restored. So clearly there's still some gap in the market in terms of inventory for America, which they have to fill. It's a short-term thing. I can guarantee you by next week, the data we'll see from America will show that they fill the gap, because they tend to always ensure that once there's that huge draw, they fill it back as soon as possible. So that's going to correct. But another striking thing we need to see in the market, which I should bring up, is the fact that if you look at the market right now in terms of currency, the British pound is doing horribly well, horribly in the market, not well, horribly in the market against the dollar. The dollar is actually strengthening. And typically when the dollar strengthens, it becomes more expensive for people to buy crude. So crude prices tend to fall. But instead, we're seeing the dollar going up, and we're seeing crude prices also going up at the same time. So there's some demand, at least in the market, that is keeping crude oil prices going up. Now, for how long will that hold? We don't know. I think it might be a bit weak, because again, refineries start to go into maintenance towards the later end of October, around Asia and Europe as well. So we may see some pull on crude oil prices by late October, thereabout.
Late October. So that now brings me to this next question, which I'm sure will definitely be ending the conversation with. How many cargoes does Nigeria have at hand to export? Looking at very attractive, global oil prices at the time, how much crude do we have to export to then quickly rake in the money?
I think we're still doing 1.6 million barrels per day. Our refineries are not consuming so much, because only, I think, Warri and Port Harcourt to some extent are working about 12-15% capacity. So bulk of it just goes straight into export, and probably about 1.4, 1.5 is still available for export at the moment. So, but we loaded a cargo of avocados. This was probably cargoes that was already in the pipeline. So now they're cleaning it out. They're going to open all the flow stations back again. So we should have about 1.4, 1.5 available, but that would increase going forward by the end of October.
So what's your own expectation for how the markets will actually start off from next week? They've got so much to chew, taking a look at issues developing in Iran, in Russia, and keeping their eye very closely on, comments coming up from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. What are your expectations?
I think the market is still upbeat right now. So the U.S. inventory data, the fact that OPEC is trying to finalize that deal having, working around modalities, and the fact that all the so-called new barrels that we're expecting haven't really hit the market yet. Libya's barrels haven't really hit the market yet. Libya is still pumping around 600, 700. So markets will probably still stay around the $50 range. We may see it start around that range next week, but from next week we may start to see more pressure, more downward pressure on oil prices.
Okay, so fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah.
And I always say I hope my fingers don't permanently stay that way, because so many issues makes you keep your fingers crossed and hope that something happens, either a policy or you don't see a dead cat bounce, and you know the market doesn't react very negatively to the issues. But thank you so much, Dolapo, for coming on the program this morning, and of course helping us to review the issues that came up in oil and gas markets this week. Well, Business Morning continues in just a moment. We're still talking about the energy market, but we're turning our attention to another segment or another part of that particular market. I'll be joined in just a bit by another energy analyst from AfriInvest, Ibrahim Babalola. Join us again.